name is Tim Clark. I'm the VP of K-12 programs at IMS Global. I'm really proud to introduce our attendees for today's session. This webinar is leveraging PII data governance to scale up the education ecosystem in schools, and it is sponsored by Global Grid for Learning, GG4L. They are a proud diamond sponsor of this event. And here we have Robert and Larry from GG4L. They'll introduce themselves more. And I just wanted to remind all of our attendees that we do have a chat and some Q&A in our tools in Cvent platform. So if you have any questions along the way, go ahead and post them in Cvent, and we will be answering those questions throughout today's session. And thank you so much. And I know that you're going to enjoy today's conversation. So Robert, over to you.
Thank you very much, Tim, and good morning, everyone. I know it's 10 a.m. now on the East Coast, so it's a little early for some people on the West. Initially, we also had planned to have Dr. Prasad Ram, known as Prom, who's the CEO and founder of Guru, to join us in the panel. He was traveling till late last night, so he may be having some issues logging in. So hopefully he'll be able to join us later on in the webinar whenever he's able to. But I'm Robert Iskander. I'm the founder and CEO of the Global Grid for Learning, otherwise known as GG4L. And with me is Larry Smith. Larry is our Chief Product Officer at GG4L. And so we're both going to be co-leading this session, and hopefully Prom will be able to join us. So again, we are very proud to be a sponsor of IMS Global. And as a company, we are all in with open standards with IMS. We have been named recently as the preferred iPaaS platform for IMS because we lead with the one roster and LTI integrations and all of our integration projects that we work with schools on and vendors. So very, very proud to be here today as a diamond sponsor. Let me see if I can get this screen to change here. So like GG4L, let's just talk a little bit about GG4L for just one or two slides. We're a membership-based public benefit corporation, so known as B Corp. And we created a membership-based model because we really believe that, to make an impact, people have to be all in. So we wanted districts and vendors to feel that they really are not only just normal vendors or customers of GG4L, but they're members of this alliance that we're creating, this grid that we're putting together as a global grid for learning. And the mission for the grid is very simple, is to really future-proof learners' skills. That's ultimately what counts, is the skills, by safely catalyzing the digital transformation that's taking place, obviously, daily in lifelong learning. And then to really pinpoint more of a focus, we're starting with the K-12 schools, but we're now expanding in higher education as well, and integrating corporate learning from employers that we work with. So this is lifelong, but we're starting with K-12. We have over, as you can see here on the left-hand side, tens of thousands of schools. Probably right now we're about 25,000 schools, 10 million learners, over 1,000 applications that are integrated in our platform. So gg4l.com in case you want to learn more. So today we want to talk about the impact of open standards on integration, but really zoom into this whole conversation about personally identifiable information, PII. So traditionally, we are a platform that sits in the cloud, as you can see here in this big cloud chart, that schools coming in from one side and vendors in the other. We have many-to-many relationships. So every single school comes on board. They integrate multiple sources of data with us, usually student information system. Now we're also integrating the learning management system, the LMS, and also in many cases, the Active Directory or any sorts of identity federations. So those are three sources of data coming in for each and every single district with all of its schools. On the other hand, we have vendors coming in and they see all of their schools in our admin dashboard. So The school comes in and sees all their vendors, and the vendor comes in and sees all their schools. So we're sort of a middleware in the middle that allows the data to flow with the control of both sides of the equation here. This enables really obviously a consent-based data sharing, which makes it secure to share the data with the consent of the owner of the data. Creates a really nice seamless workflow automation. And, you know, we call this data governance. It's the ability for the school districts, who usually own most of the data, to know where does their data sit at any one time, and to have basically timestamp every time the data is shared with a vendor. You know, obviously, it's not all the data. It's usually a very small subset of the total set of data elements that we have. So each district gets to see which specific data elements are being shared with the vendor. So there are filters built in, there are data cleansing technologies built in, and we also create a whole audit trail for every time a data sync happens with every single vendor. So we have an audit trail for all of the transactions. Improving data quality is a big deal, but you can see here the last bullet, one roster compliance. We are 100% one roster based. We can integrate with proprietary APIs if and when a vendor is not able to accommodate open standards, but we eventually move them to an open standard based model. So short stopgap type of strategy to make sure everybody's in, everybody's getting what they need out of the platform. So as you can see here, this is all about operational efficiency. It's about having a single point of management and oversight, improving security, because everything we do, the data is encrypted at rest and it's encrypted in transit. So it's much more secure than trying to send the data in CSV files through email. Obviously, that doesn't scale and is not secure. And it increases the reliability of making sure that when the students log in every morning, it's the latest and greatest data, because it's a real-time sync. So there isn't a codependence on a manual process in the middle to make sure that the data gets to be updated to every vendor. And last but not least, it's all about governance, and it's all about compliance with the law, data privacy laws and security regulations. So this is kind of what the platform is today, and I'm going to share with you where we're taking it. But before I do that, I'd like to interrupt for a second. I want to welcome Dr. Prasad Ram. Ram, I'm glad you were able to join. And I was telling the audience that you may be running a few minutes late. So welcome with us on the webinar.
Thank you very much, Robert.
And so when you start looking at this whole, what subset of the data are we sharing? We'll start with what we call the roster data. Sorry, there's a bit of a glitch there in the format, but it's a roster data, which is the classroom, the students, the staff, and the guardian. And we also, have the parent guardian data, contact information, which is only shared if and when the vendor has been approved to have access to that guardian data. In many cases, some vendors have to communicate with parents and guardians in their products and services that they offer. But we also put in the identity data. Now, we don't stop at the roster. We start expanding that circle you see here in the green zone, where we also start integrating other things that vendors need to have access to, again, with the consent of the schools, things like grades, IEP, 504 demographic data, being able to capture behavioral data, attendance, medical records, things like that. So this data integration model keeps expanding and starts with the roster, and it goes on with extensions from there. But it also is used for identity management and single sign-on. More recently, we're starting to get involved into much more LMS-driven, integrating an LMS with another third-party application, and me being able to provision users out of the LMS for, let's say, teacher in the class has a roster of students in the course registered, being able to do tight integration with the vendor's product right through the LMS. So the kids would log into the LMS and then do single sign-on into the application. But more importantly, being able to bring back grades and achievements and activities back into the LMS. We use LPI 1.3 to do that. And today we demonstrate that through our partnership with Coursera and with Google, Quick Labs. We integrate with all of the LMSs you can see here on the left-hand side, the Google Classroom, Canvas, Brightspace, Moodle, and Blackboard, and Schooling. It's missing from it. So it's all about, integration is all about, enabling single sign-on, enabling data exchange, and at the end of the day, content integration. We've just recently introduced what you see here on the top of at the bottom of the slide, what we call PII Shield. So I'm going to be talking a little bit now about what is PII Shield. Before I do that, we have partnered with IMS Global on this whole Trusted application program that they have launched, and it's an awesome service. And if you haven't really looked at IMS Global's Trusted apps, you should. If you're a school district or even a vendor, vendors go through a vetting process and they get approved and reviewed. Their apps get reviewed, and once they are meeting all the qualification, they become Trusted certified. And one of the things we kind of derive from this whole process, working with IMS and Trusted, is defining what is a PII sensitive data elements, because you really can't get too many people to agree on what is PII and what is not PII. It's always still a topic that has some gray fuzziness around it. So to rely on a source that is an industry standard, we are working with IMS Global to look at their own taxonomy, and we've basically leveraged that to define what is PII sensitive. And so you can see here on the left-hand side, it is anything that is traceable directly or indirectly to an individual. Any data that traces an individual uniquely. Could be a full name, could be an email address, phone number, street address, and many other types of criteria like this. And we try to make sure in our dashboard, and you will see in a screenshot in a minute, how we actually help districts using the IMS taxonomy to identify what is and what isn't PII sensitive. So if a district is being asked to share a PII sensitive data element with a third-party vendor, that information is right there in front of them in black and white. And beware as a district that you are doing that. So you may want to go the extra mile in terms of vetting that vendor for compliance with data privacy laws and for security infrastructure for their product. So why do vendors go through the overhead and having to really store or collect PII data in their products? Well, what's the purpose? You can see here on the left-hand side that usually it's four things. One is to personalize the product. And so, you're addressing me with my full name, Robert Iskander, instead of just, a kind of an invisible ghost. It's for communicating, so having an email address allows you to communicate through email, or if a phone number, SMS, you could send an SMS message. So communication is really an important function that requires PII data. Authentication, being many vendors use email address as unique identifiers. And this is kind of a practice from the past. We're trying to get vendors now to move on and stop doing that. There are many other ways to authenticate a user without having to need an email address as a unique identifier. And then activation and provisioning. To be able to provision an account, in some cases, they need some of those PII data elements. Again, it goes to unique identifiers. The overhead the vendors have to pay, and it obviously is not trivial. Privacy compliance. And so with every single district, every single school, they have to go through the whole data privacy compliance paperwork. And in some cases, some vendors, startups, early stage companies find it a bit challenging with all of that work that they have to do. It's complicated in terms of standards. There's a lot of security audits, and it adds costs, it adds overhead to doing business. So the question is, do we really need to always share PII data with the vendors, with each and every single vendor? Answer is no, probably not. We have the ability to be able to, filter some of that PII data. This is why we call it PII Shield. The Shield is really more of a filtering mechanism, but to replace the codependence on PII, we've anonymized the identities of the students and are able to share this anonymized unique identifier with the vendor. So the vendor, and also at the same time, mask certain information. So you don't have to give the full name like Robert Iskander. It could be just Robert I. Well, there's a lot of Robert I's. You don't really know which Robert I you were talking about. It's just not considered PII if it's just Robert I. Things like that will allow us to eventually avoid the need and the codependence on PII data when we provision an application in embedded. Here's a bit of a screenshot. As you can see, this is our admin console, in case you haven't seen it before. On the top here, you can see this is a demo application, of course. I don't want to use real data. And in red, we identified that we are sharing, this district is sharing with this vendor sensitive data. So it's right there, there's an alert. So the district doesn't have to actually go through the data to know that, but it's summarized on the top. And then when you look at the bottom here, you see all these elements, says sensitive data next to it. And so again, we use the IMS Global definition of PII sensitive, and we rely on that model and we display what is PII sensitive. Now, if the district does not want to share those PII sensitive, all they have to do is untick the boxes here on the right-hand side. And to replace it and to mask this information, we offer them alternatives to anonymize the full name and or to mask it basically with a first, last, initial, or vice versa. Being able to maybe create a new anonymized email address. If an email address is needed, we create an encrypted anonymized email address. So there's always many different ways to go around it. Sorry, I should have showed you the slide. We have this GG4L ID for anonymized authentication. So we help log in the student with the user ID and password and then let them in the application vendor. So the application vendor doesn't have to do the authentication at their own app. To personalize, we use one of the two names, not the full name. To do communication, we are creating a solution where we are now bundling APIs for SMS, for email, for voice, for video communications. And so we could be the communication broker, not just the data broker, but the communication broker. So the vendor knows that they want to send an SMS message to this user, unique user, could be teacher, could be parent. We would do that, relay that message for them with the unique identifier. So that way they don't have to store all of the PII data in their system. And we, of course, anonymize the roster as well. So it's provisioned anonymously. This is kind of the model, and it's a journey. We're just starting this journey. I'm not going to claim that we have it all figured out and it's all ironed out. It's still early days. And we still have very few vendors now coming on board saying this is a great idea, let's do it. But the vision that we have is that we are able to circumvent the need for PII. And by doing this, let's say 80% of the vendors serving a district may not have to go through the vetting rigor that other vendors who are storing PII have to go through if they don't store nor collect. That's important as well. Like the vendor cannot collect on their own PII data either. So if they don't collect nor store PII data, they can get through the vetting process a lot faster, a lot easier, with less complexity and less paperwork. And the district could sleep better at night because there is no PII data in their system. So even if they, for God forbid, get attacked, cyber attack, ransomware, whatever, there is no PII data at risk. So this is it. This is what I wanted to share with you today. And I'd like to invite Prom, who is one of our partners with CEO of Guru, to talk a little bit about his experience with GG4L, with Navigator. And Prom, it's all yours.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Robert. So we have Guru is a nonprofit organization that develops Google Maps for learning. Think of it as it's a GPS for learning. It's all about understanding where the learner is at any given time. With your Google Maps experience, as you know that it's the blue arrow in Google Maps that's more important. Since once you have the blue arrow, then you can establish the destination and come up with a route for that. So what Guru provides is the ability to locate the learner with high precision across all of their learning facets, like could be science, math, and English, or also social emotional learning. Now, the way we are able to locate the learner with high precision is by capturing data after every learning activity that the student engages in. So this kind of allows us to, this requires us to work on how we exchange data between these different systems that this navigator interacts with. So as an example, in your Google Maps experience, as you're journeying across all the, as you're driving through the whole thing, then the system is capturing the GPS signal from a variety of interactions that you may be having, where you may pull over at a Starbucks or you may pull over at a gas station and so on. And that's kind of what Google Guru does as well. And the ability to capture the data, then use AI to operationalize the science of learning and engage the entire community is really what Guru provides. And our ability to work with GG4L to streamline how we systematically capture the data without, where we are only interested in the learning data as opposed to any PII information about the learner, so that we are able to apply the PII Shield and get access to the learning data of the learner from their interaction, whether with the third-party product, third-party assessment, and any of the other school systems that they may be using, to very precisely locate the learner, allows Navigator to do its perform its job of coming up with routes and reroutes for the learner. So I'll just pause there, Robert. And
that was a very good summary. Thank you so much, Prom. Obviously, as we want to deploy an application like Guru to a huge mass audience, we have over 2,000 districts now, members of GG4L, and these districts will see in the App Store that we offer them a special offer. If you want to turn on Guru, it's free. Navigator is free. So the districts don't know who Guru is, up front. They haven't vetted Guru yet, but being able to tell them that we are shielding all the PII data before they're shared with Guru, the roster shared with Guru, actually gives a little bit more confidence to the districts to be able to say, let's try it, let's turn it on, and then see if this is something we want to continue the journey with. So it's more about improving trust with the vendor that you still don't know, that you want to try their products for a while. And that's kind of the first step in a journey with any vendor. By shielding the PII data and provisioning that trial account with the vendor, or the production account even, it improves the trust with the vendor. So that's kind of the purpose why we involved PII Shield in the provisioning on demand of the Guru Navigator for any of the districts that use our platform. So that's one use case. Larry, I would like to bring you into the discussion here to talk a little bit about your own experience as a chief product officer as we work with Coursera and SchoolTube, and also bring their applications on the special trials for our App Store.
So, protecting systems and data has always been challenging, and now, especially with cloud service providers and school districts having more and more information in the cloud outside the data center, we live in this world where the network perimeter has either completely disappeared for us or has largely disappeared for us. Everything or almost everything is outside the firewall. So the question is, where is all of your data and how do you protect it? So one way to think about it is you need to define sort of a virtual privacy perimeter for your data. So typically, you'll have some very close hold information systems in a school district. That might be the SIS, the LMS, maybe some kind of database like EdTech or any other system that has sensitive data that you want to share with other applications or other services. So identify what those systems are and what data is in them is sort of the first step. What do I most want to protect? And then establish a perimeter around those. It's going to be a virtual perimeter. Our platform, an integration platform as a service, is a way to define that perimeter. And now you have data consumers, outside of that perimeter. Those are your cloud applications, service providers like SMS and messaging service providers, other agencies, family services, public health, those kinds of folks. So then you want to lock down access to administrative and staff access to those systems. You want to identify the data sets that you're sharing. So what data does each application, each service, each partner need? Then within those data sets, you want to identify specific elements that are sensitive. So PII is one of them. There could be others. And once you identify those, you have a decision to make. You want to decide for each data element that's sensitive, Do you want to block it? Do you want to transform it into something else so that the other application gets a data set? For example, Robert was talking about full names. You can truncate and give only first names. That would be a way of transforming. Otherwise, you could make a random assignment, depends. Or you can completely allow it. So, clearly if you're dealing with somebody like family services, you may have to send health information or complete names or social security numbers or whatever they happen to be. So it's your decision. You want to control it. So then what you really want to do is automate all of the processes of sharing data. So human processes are error prone. And sometimes people just don't show up to work. So those transfers don't happen. So automation gives you efficiency, it gives you reliability, and it increases security because you just don't make as many human errors. You want to make sure you have an audit trail. So when it comes time either to complete some kind of compliance audit, or if you have an adverse event and you have to deal with law enforcement in an investigation, you want to know what data you shared, when you shared it, who you shared it with, so that you can meet your requirements as quickly as possible and as professionally as possible. So what you're really looking for is to operational efficiency, and that comes through automation. You're looking for high reliability, so you want to be sure data transfers happen, they happen on time, they happen consistently, and you want good data quality within those transfers. You're looking for traceability and accountability, so you want accountability on part of your staff, and you want accountability on part of the vendors and partners that you share data with, and you want to be able to meet compliance for security and privacy, as quickly and easily as possible. So, Robert, I mean, that's what we've seen, and I think that's what we try to help people with every day. And I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you very much, Larry. I mean, that deeper dive in the overall bigger picture was really helpful. I have Coursera listed here in SchoolTube as a case study, and I'm going to quickly use this as an example. But before I do that, we have a question from the audience. It says, what about student level usage data from vendors? Can it handle usage from a product at the student level and pass it along? And the answer is yes, because we could work with each one of the vendors we work with in our ecosystem. We have a anonymized unique identifier. So we are able to pull from that vendor all the usage analytics with that unique identifier as the filter, and join it with the rest of the data coming in from different vendors and create the ability to pass this along to a data warehouse, a data lake, like Guru has a data lake that we work with. So we can pass it along to Guru's data lake, still anonymized, but with all of the usage analytics that will bring value to the data analytics dashboards that Guru presents as an example. We have also another solution for student engagement tracking that tracks every single click on the browser, so the teachers and the schools have much more visibility into the engagement of the student with all of their online applications and measuring time of attendance, etc. Again, we're using unique identifiers to track all of this data when we store it, and we're able to report it with these unique identifiers. We could later join it with the real identities in the presentation mode, but the data would be stored anonymized in our databases. Having said that, I'd like to talk a little bit about Coursera before we run out of time, because it sounds like we have only a couple of minutes left. We've partnered with Coursera, and Coursera traditionally only serves higher ed. And the problem was their system was not designed to serve any students below the age of 18. So our partnership with Coursera created a new white label instance of Coursera that all of the provisioning we do for high school students who are below the age of 18 is anonymized provisioning. And so inside Coursera, Coursera doesn't know the full name, does not know the email address, because we anonymize the email addresses as well, and any type of communication is turned off. So this is kind of a form of a protection for students below the age of 18. So now we can safely offer all of these certification pathways for different skills and different careers to the schools and to K-12, even though the system originally wasn't designed to do that. So it's a big win for everyone. It's a win for Coursera, and it's a win for the schools that would love to have Coursera for their students. So we have another use case with SchoolTube, where we make it available also on demand district-wide. Again, we anonymize all the PII data for students and teachers in there as well. So This is a journey, like I said, and we're just starting this journey. We will have a lot more use cases develop over the years to come, and we're going to create a much more granular tools to do this on the fly, integrating it with communication tools. So I hope this was informative to all of you. If you have any more questions, please feel free to reach out to us. I'm Robert at GG4L and Larry at GG4L. And so feel free to ask any questions in the future of us. Thank you very much for your time this morning. And thank you, Tim, for hosting us.
Thank you so much. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.